Today we'll be reading Acts 7, verses 1 through 19. Then said the high priest, "Are these things so?" And he said, "Men, brethren, and fathers, hearken. The God of glory appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Charran, and said unto him, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and come into the land which I shall show thee. Then came he out of the land of the Chaldeans, and dwelt in Charran. And from thence, when his father was dead, he removed him into this land, wherein ye now dwell. And he gave him none inheritance in it, no, not so much as to set his foot on. Yet he promised that he would give it to him for possession, and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child. And God spake on this wise, that his seed should sojourn in a strange land, that they should bring them into bondage, and entreat them evil 400 years. And the nation to whom they shall be in bondage will I judge, said God, and after that shall they come forth and serve me in this place. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham begat Isaac, and circumcised him the 8th day. And Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat the 12 patriarchs. And the patriarchs, moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt. But God was with him, and delivered him out of all his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he made him governor over Egypt, and all his house. Now there came a dearth over all the land of Egypt, and Chanaan, in great affliction, and our fathers found no sustenance. And when Jacob heard that there was corn in Egypt, he sent out our fathers first. And at the second time Joseph was made known to his brethren, and Joseph's kindred was made known unto Pharaoh. Then sent Joseph, and called his father Jacob to him, and all his kindred 75 souls. So Jacob went down into Egypt, and died, he and our fathers. And they were carried over into Shechem, and laid in the sepulchre that Abraham bought for a sum of money of the sons of Emor, the father of Shechem. But when the time of the promise drew nigh, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt. Till another king arose, which knew not Joseph. The same dealt subtly with our kindred, and evil entreated our fathers, so they cast out their young children, to the end they might not live. Now that the lies about Stephen have brought him before the Sanhedrin, he has a chance to speak in his defense. But notice what he does. He doesn't even mention the charges against him. Instead, he launches into a sermon to reinforce the message that these men need to accept Jesus as the promised Messiah. He begins by recounting their history. Beginning with Abraham, Stephen paints a picture of a cycle of how God has worked with Israel up to this point. That cycle includes God making a promise and giving a command, the recipient showing faith in God's promise and obeying, and then God delivering on his promise. In each case, he also shows the areas in which the person being discussed has uncertainty or even confusion about what is happening, but they believe anyway. In Abraham's case, God brings him away from his home and makes promises about his descendants, even though he has no children at that time and is well past childbearing years. But faith produces obedience, which produces God's blessings. Next, he moves on to Jacob and Isaac and the 12 sons whose descendants would make up the 12 tribes of Israel. Certainly, Jacob struggled to see what God was doing when he was sold into slavery by his brothers. But he's faithful to God's promises and eventually sees how God was providing for his entire family. Stephen is setting the stage to tell the members of this Sanhedrin that they need to exhibit this kind of faith in what God has done through Jesus. And he's not through illustrating the point yet. He will carry this history lesson further as we see later in the chapter. And as we wait for his conclusion, let's ask ourselves, are we trusting God to the point of obedience? Are we doing everything he's leading us to do through his word and through the Holy Spirit? If we're willing to have that kind of faith that creates obedience, we too can see God work.